convincing them that these things is actually beneficial for the Afghans in the longer run. Thank you.
Thank you, Arnestrand. Back to you, Harold Ryan.
This sort of leads a little bit into what Arne was talking about, as the Afghan population is primarily up along the east coast, the eastern part of the country. That's the heaviest populated area. Helmand and Kandahar in the south are not very heavily populated. And that's primarily where the conflict is ongoing and where all the international soldiers are that are fighting. And then I'm wondering if we should rather call this conflict in a specific region of Afghanistan and be able to sort out that you have maybe a civil war that's taking place in the south, where sometimes you have suicide bombers in Kabul or in Kunar or in Khost, but primarily it's a conflict in one region of the country, which actually gives us the ability to see it in a different perspective, where there are actually development projects that are going on around the rest of the country. I'd like to hear your comments on how you see that as either a national conflict or a partial conflict in one region.
Lars Erslev Andersen, please.
I think it's quite accurate to say that the basic conflict concerning battle issues is concentrated in the south, and then we have these related terrorist and whatever fightings in the other places, where we also have at least some possibilities for going in and develop and help developing things. I think, going back to your former question, I think civil society is good and it's fine, and we can agree with Arne and everything. But if we want to go through civil society, the civil society needs to have some institutions to rely on, and that means that we cannot go in and invest, so to say, in civil society and hope for civil society unless we also secure that there are some also locally institution that works. And I think this is very important also because this is exactly the focus of our enemy, that they are doing with this parallel administration and so on and so forth. So civil society can develop if you give it the space and the institutional frames to develop, not before. And I think the problem in the strategy, as far as it is a strategy, is that we are focusing militarily in the south on behalf of developing in the other areas. I think it should be the other way around.
Thank you, Lars Erslev Andersen. Before giving Harold the word again, Gunnar Olsen, please.
Okay, thank you very much. 2 remarks. First, the observation that in line with what was just mentioned by my colleagues here, there is also draw the attention to the ethnic dimension of the conflict in Afghanistan that to a certain extent is overlooked and is about the Pashtuns against the others, to put it very squarely. And the other observation is the urge to all of us not automatically to identify civil society with modern NGOs. There is a traditional civil society that is often more important, has always been, and is still more important than the modern NGOs and similar. And this in Afghanistan is very much the traditional religious infrastructure, if you can use that terrible word. The ulama, the Islamic congregation councils, to say something familiar in a Danish context, which has not only been in charge of religious life, which is a lot, but also of the justice sector on the decentral level. And regarding modern civil society, this is not only NGOs. In Afghanistan, like in many other transition and developing countries, maybe the most important part of civil society are the new, very effective and efficient criminal structures, often related to international organized crime. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I will give the word back to Harold Ryan, who got a third and final question before we continue with the rest of the opponents. Thank you.
Early in the summer of last summer, there was a longer article in the Journal of Foreign Affairs, written by Michael Sempler and Fonini Krista, I think it's pronounced, which was called "Flipping the Taliban." And their premise is that the Taliban is not a homogenous organization, but is made up of a number of different parts. Some are more radical than others. Some have become Taliban simply because that was the best team to be on at the time. So my question then is should the Afghan Taliban be considered a homogenous organization or not?
Thank you.
Thank you. Well, there have already been a number of very interesting points with which I agree. I think the Afghans lead a primitive economic life, but it really is wrong to regard them as primitives. It's a sophisticated society. It has gone on for a very long time. We suddenly, belatedly have become champion of women. Amanullah Khan, at the beginning of last century, in 1920s, forced his wife and daughters to go unveiled and started a campaign of education for girls and unveiling women. During the communist period, there was great effort for girls' schools and unveiling and so on. So it's not something new. What was said about civil society is that we should really be aware that we don't have a condescending attitude towards these people. The conflict that we are seeing now is partly ethnic. The Pashtuns are not the majority. They are the biggest minority. They are probably between 30 and 40% of the population. Roughly the same are the Tajik in the north. Now, we should not get into the middle of this conflict. The history of Afghanistan, lawyer Jerga, has been going on for a very long time. That is a local type of parliament. It doesn't mean our democratic system, but it means consultation. They reach consensus through discussion and through argument. And so I think, and the other factor of Afghanistan has always been, because it is a disparate country with ethnic groups, a central government which controls everything from the center hasn't worked and will not work. What we should go for is, first of all, a great deal of respect for the Afghans. Let them do what they want to do rather than tell them this is going to be a British or a Danish or an American democracy. And finally, allow this local diversity so that the Pashtuns in the south, they have got their own Pashtun code of conduct. The Tajiks in the north near Herat, one reason why Ismail Khan was rejected is because this is a tendency that now, unfortunately, again, the Pashtuns are beginning to isolate the people from the north of the country and the Hazaras and the Tajiks. And that is a very bad development. What we should do is to have a loose coalition in the way that Afghanistan has been always run, with strong elements locally and with some sort of overarching central government. If we want to go against the grain and against the history and impose something on them, for heaven's sake, Afghanistan, even under the Taliban, or probably not quite then, had a better women's record than Saudi Arabia, our friends and allies, of which we don't mention, we don't say a word. Leave these people to develop in the same way that we have developed our civil societies, to arrange something which comes out of the native soil rather than something which is imposed on them. And above all, let's not be so condescending. They are not primitive. They are uneducated, they are poor. It's the third or the fourth poorest country in the world, but has gone on for centuries, for thousands of years, and it will go on if we allow them to find their own way into the modern society.